Welcome back to another episode of No Shame with Shane. I'm your host, Shane Fordham, with all these shameless sports takes. We got it done. Week 1, Eagles starting out the season 1-0, getting it done against the Packers in Brazil, 34-29. You know, Eagles got the dub, but I got some concerns. I got some compliments. My biggest concern from last night was Jalen Hurts. Now, my opinion, Jalen Hurts is a top 5 at least quarterback in the league, top 2 quarterback in the NFC, at least top 2, top 1. But last night, Jalen Hurts looked like the worst player on the Eagles offense. I mean, just making stupid throws, two of which ended up being turnovers, interceptions. If you were watching the game, he really could have thrown 2 more. He really could have had 2 more interceptions on top of the 2 that he already had, just DBs just dropping the ball. But Jalen Hurts definitely looked like the worst player on that Eagles offense. I mean, Jalen Hurts did make some great plays, making through a great pass to Saquon Barkley for a touchdown, corner of the end zone, finding A.J. Brown out deep for a catch and run touchdown, made some great plays on his legs, through his legs. But he definitely made last night more of a losable game than it already was. And if Jalen Hurts plays like that the rest of the season, if this is the version of Jalen Hurts that we are going to see throughout the season, which I don't believe we are, but if it is, the Eagles could very well be a first round exit again this year, just like we were last year. I mean, last night was really one of those games where you really feel lucky to have a guy like Saquon Barkley, just an all-out superstar who is just so dynamic with the football in his hands. It makes up for the slack in other positions like what we had at quarterback last night. I mean, it's one thing to play sort of like a 49er Jimmy G type of game where you don't exactly win the game for your team, but you're not losing it either. You're not really winning the game for your team, but you're also not putting your team in a position to lose. Jalen Hurts easily could have lost that game for us last night with some of those throws that he made. Luckily the DBs just dropped the ball, but Jalen Hurts could have easily if one of those throws, those wild throws is caught by the DB. I mean, last night could have ended very differently than it did. So that's really my biggest concern is if this becomes a trend, Jalen Hurts making bonehead mistakes becomes a trend. What will this season look like for the Eagles? But then I also didn't like the hits that Jalen Hurts was taking last night. I mean, he made some great plays on his legs, a great first down run, especially that was especially great play in the last 2 minutes of the game. Got the Eagles the first down, in order to kind of seal the deal, run the clock out. But the hits he was taking last night made me nervous. I mean, you don't want to see your franchise quarterback take hits unnecessarily at a high rate. And it honestly gave me PTSD of Carson Wentz in 2017. I mean, Carson Wentz in 2017 having an MVP caliber year, really would have won MVP if he didn't get hurt. But Carson Wentz having an MVP year in 2017, the Eagles face off against the Rams towards the end of the season. They're in the red zone. As you know, drops back, decides to keep it himself, call his own number, dives for the goal line, ends up tearing his ACL. Takes a nasty collision from 2 Rams players, ends up tearing his ACL. Now, at that point, all of us Eagles fans thought that our season was over. Our playoff chances and hopes were done. That, you know, there was no shot at a Super Bowl coming off of the spectacular season that we were having up to that point, you know. And the Eagles this year, we don't have a Nick Foles on the roster at that backup quarterback position that can lead this team to a Super Bowl. You know, the Eagles got lucky that year. And then, you know, just thinking about another scrambling quarterback whose career was altered due to injuries, RG3. RG3, 2013, coming off a Heisman year at Baylor. Wins rookie of the year 2013, made the Pro Bowl team, was a Pro Bowler. Took unnecessary hits his rookie year, ends up tearing his ACL and LCL. You know, so it makes me nervous seeing Jalen Hurts taking all of these unnecessary hits, especially at this early in the season. And, you know, I would never wish injuries on anyone, but it just makes me nervous seeing him take those hits. Now, I'm not saying Jalen Hurts shouldn't scramble. You know, that's his game. You know, don't want to put him into a box. I mean, he's a dual threat quarterback. That's what he does. But that also doesn't mean that you need to break every single tackle whenever you leave the pocket. You know, so that's something that just makes me nervous. And especially in Jalen Hurts's case, where he doesn't need to do that. He doesn't need to play Superman ball, superhero ball, make all these save us plays with his legs in order for the Eagles offense to move. I mean, that is the whole point behind surrounding him with the weapons that he has this year, like Saquon Barkley, like Jahan Dotson, like AJ Brown, you know, like Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, you know, surrounding Jalen Hurts with these weapons on offense. Howie Roseman did that to prolong Jalen Hurts' career. Surrounding your franchise quarterback with the weapons that the Eagles have this year, it's to take care of your franchise quarterback. It's so that your quarterback doesn't have to take unnecessary risks and force himself to make a lot of these save us plays through his legs when he doesn't have to. You know, you have a running back that is dangerous in the pass and the run, who can make different plays with the ball in his hands, you know, who is designed to take hits as a running back. You don't need to take those same hits as a quarterback. You have what should be the best receiver trio in the entire NFL in AJ Brown and Devontae Smith and Jahan Dotson. Two of those names in AJ and Devontae who are receiver ones, who are really both receiver ones. Jahan Dotson, who is a really good number 2 option. You have a plethora of weapons to choose from and to use in order to keep yourself in order to prevent from putting yourself at risk, to keep yourself from putting yourself in unnecessary harm's way, you know, from taking on linebackers and these athletic long edge rushers unnecessarily, you know. So that's one thing that definitely made me nervous last night. Is I don't expect Jalen Hurts to continue the way he played last night throughout the rest of the season, but I am concerned with the level of contact that he is willing to take this season. You know, that's something that I feel like that's something that can be prevented this year, you know, in the game plan, in the preparations by Kellen Moore in terms of how he uses these different guys. You know, Jahan Dotson, who can be a jet sweep guy, motion guy, just like he can be a deep threat guy, you know, 1v1 guy. Saquon Barkley being able to be used as a passing back, as a sweep back, as a power back. You know, so you have different weapons that you can use in different ways that I think can prevent Jalen Hurts from taking some of the unnecessary hits that he did last night. Because, I mean, like I said, we don't have a Nick Foles on the roster this year that would be able to keep our season alive once our number one guy goes down. I mean, who are we going to count on? Kenny Pickett? Kenny Pickett to lead us and give us a deep playoff run? So, I mean, I feel like the focus this week and as we move throughout this regular season is how can we protect Jalen Hurts, not keep him in a box, but how can we allow Jalen Hurts to be as effective as possible within this offense, where it also doesn't put him at an unnecessary risk on a weekly basis. But someone else who made last night a very losable game for us was Cam Jurgens. Young center trying to fill the shoes of Jason Kelce, who retired this past offseason. Future Hall of Famer, multi-time Pro Bowler, superstar, one of the best linemen to ever play the game. I mean, Jurgens coming in to fill in those shoes, botched 2 snaps last night, one that resulted in a turnover. I mean, that cannot be a habit this season. Now then again, he did make some good blocks last night. Had a key pulling block as a center, which is a hard thing to do. There wasn't a lot of most of the pressure from last night came off the edge, from Rashawn Gary and blitzing DBs. Kenny Clark wasn't much of a factor last night on the interior, coming from that interior spot on the D line. But Cam Jurgens has to be careful of those snaps. That cannot be a habit this year, especially because of how important that center position is for us. Not just in general, but is for us with our heavy usage of the tush push, something that has the brotherly shove, something that was very effective for us last year in those short yardage situations. So Cam Jurgens is definitely a concern for me right now. I don't expect him to make that a habit this throughout this season. It was just enough to be a concern for me, but I don't expect him to make that a trend. I think that was just a rookie making rookie mistakes. I don't expect to keep seeing that this season, but there was enough last night to be concerned, rightfully so as an Eagles fan, so definitely concerned about him, but with the concerns, there also come compliments from last night's win. I mean, the biggest one being Saquon Barkley. I mean, Saquon Barkley was dominant all game. I mean, overall, the Eagles offense was more smooth in the second half. Looked a lot better in the second half as opposed to the first half, but Saquon looked dominant throughout the entire game. I mean, over 100 rushing yards, 3 total touchdowns, 2 from which were on the ground. I mean, Saquon Barkley is looking like the best player on the offense right now. I mean, just because of all the different ways that we can use him, Saquon Barkley is definitely going to have a breakout year this year. It's definitely going to be an offensive player of the year candidate. I don't think that he'll end up taking the award home over Bijan Robinson just because of the surrounding team that Bijan is on as compared to the Eagles with Saquon Barkley. I think that Saquon Barkley will have an outstanding year, enough to make him a top 3 finalist. But I do think Bijan will end up taking it home just because of the fact that his teammates aren't as good as Saquon's teammates. His quarterback isn't as good as Saquon's quarterback, which will make Bijan more important to the Falcons than Saquon will be for the Eagles this year. But Saquon Barkley was just a man amongst boys last night. I mean, like I said before, it really makes you ecstatic, especially as an Eagles fan, that we have a guy like this on our team who can make up for the lackadaisical play of our quarterback or of anyone else who may be having a bad night. I mean, I definitely agree with the notion that Saquon Barkley will have a similar effect on the Eagles, just like how Christian McCaffrey had on the 49ers when he was first traded. I mean, you give a guy who is really a top 2, top 3 running back in the league when healthy, you give him one of the best O lines in the league. I mean, you can only imagine what he would be able to do when he actually has somewhat of a protection around him. I mean, we're talking about a guy who was a 1,000-yard rusher in New York. I mean, one of the worst O lines in the league. This dude's all-purpose yards are up there. He's rushing for over 1,000 yards. I mean, he looks like a franchise running back, face of the team. So you put that same guy behind an O-line that has been top 5, top 10, fluctuating between top 5, top 10 in terms of pass protection, run blocking. You can only imagine what the type of numbers that he can put up in this situation. So I definitely agree with the notion that Saquon Barkley will have an offensive player of the year caliber year with the Eagles in this situation, being having the protection that he will this year. I definitely think that he can have the same type of impact that Christian McCaffrey had, especially because we're talking about a guy that has as much talent as Christian McCaffrey, a guy who is equally dangerous in the pass as he is in the run. I definitely think that the Saquon addition this past offseason is going to do wonders for the Eagles offense this year, especially on nights where, we see this type of performance from Jalen, from Jalen Hurts, where, he'll have a couple turnovers, he'll have a couple of questionable balls, so, I mean, Saquon Barkley, it really doesn't even feel real. The fact that I'm an Eagles fan talking about how much I appreciate Saquon Barkley being an Eagle, being the first running back since LaShawn McCoy to have over 100 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns. I honestly just want to fast forward to next week versus Atlanta. What are we going to see versus an Atlanta defense, having a premier running back like Saquon in a backfield with Jalen Hurts, having in a field that is now more stretched out for him with receivers like AJ Brown and Devontae Smith on the outside, and a tight end like Dallas Goedert, and a slot receiver like Jahan Dotson. Overall, the season is still looking good. The season is still looking like much more of an improvement as opposed to last season. But another compliment I gotta highlight is Zach Bond. Zach Bond was, a very underrated pickup for the Eagles this past offseason, coming from New Orleans. Zach Bond was everywhere last night at that linebacker position, which meant a lot for us with having Devin White being listed as injured for last night, missing last night's game. Zach Bond was everywhere last night, leading the team in tackles with 15, 2 sacks, 1 TFL. Zach Bond is the presence that we missed last year at that linebacker position. Having that second level of support behind that D line, that kind of struggled converting on the pass rush last night, at least in the first half, but Zach Bond was, I think, is looking like a great addition to this Eagles team. And it really makes me even more excited for this defense, having a linebacker core with Zach Bond, with Nakobe Dean, and then with Devin White, once he's back, assuming he should be back next week versus the Falcons. This is exactly the type of play that we needed at that linebacker position to keep us from having that gaping hole behind the D line that we did last year. So definitely excited about that. And then speaking of defense, Quinion Mitchell. I mean, it went just how I said it would go. They picked on him after just 5 plays in their first series, the Packers' first series. Jordan Love was just itching to take a shot at the rookie cornerback, and the rookie didn't back down. Quinion was strapping up. He was doing his job. I mean, was stride for stride with Christian Watson on that bomb of a shot that Jordan Love took, hoping for a touchdown. I mean, he was stride for stride with Watson. He was on his hip. He had him. He was kind of bodying him outside towards the sideline. Really was the perfect complement to Darius Slay. If we were stuck with James Bradbury out there, I mean, that would have been an easy touchdown for Christian Watson. So, it was just like I said, having that guy on the opposite side of Darius Slay, it makes one less hole on the defense than what we had last year. Having a guy that we can count on to do his job, execute, play defense, someone who was able to play man-to-man coverage and can succeed in the zone. Quinion Mitchell is also looking like a great pickup. I mean, there have been good reports on him throughout this entire offseason from OTAs, from minicamp, and we saw it pay off last night. We saw it all come to fruition in last night's matchup against the Packers, because we know that the Packers have really an underrated group of receivers, in Watson and Jaden Reed, who went off last night, in Romeo Dobbs, in Wilkes. They have guys that can tear the top off of a defense, but that can also go up and win at those 50-50 balls in those one-on-one situations. So having Quinion Mitchell, another DB who can play on the opposite side of Darius Slay, having a guy like that we can also count on to eliminate his side of the field in terms of pass coverage will also mean a great deal for this defense, especially as the defensive line improves throughout this regular season, creating more pressure, as guys like Bryce Huff and Josh Sweat and Jalen Carter, start to heat up throughout the course of the season. I mean, this edition of Quinion Mitchell is going to mean wonders for this defense as well. So really excited to see what the Eagles do next week against the Falcons at home at the Link. Can't wait to talk about it. Can't wait to preview that game. Can't wait to do a post game on it. So we'll be back later on with that. But that is all for today's edition of No Shame with Shane. If you haven't already, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of our social media platforms. And I will be back later on with more shameless takes.